For 70 years, every kid in America knew one name for toys. Then private equity came. Picture this: a company worth $11 billion, 7 decades of making childhood magical, destroyed in months by financial engineering. Welcome back to Arthur Lee's Adventures. I'm Arthur Lee, and today we're conducting a corporate autopsy on Toys R Us. After 35 years watching companies rise and fall, I thought nothing could surprise me about how empires collapse. But this story? This one genuinely bothers me. Over the next 14 minutes, we'll examine 10 critical moments that transformed the world's largest toy retailer from an $11 billion giant to empty shelves and locked doors. We'll see how a company that survived the rise of Walmart, the birth of the internet, and countless economic downturns was ultimately killed by the very people who claimed they were saving it. If you're fascinated by how empires fall, subscribe and join me every week as we uncover the stories behind the headlines. Trust me, this story has everything: innovation, betrayal, and an ending that will make you question everything you think you know about American business. Let's begin. Fact number 10. Charles Lazarus founded Children's Bargain Town in 1948, selling baby furniture in Washington, D.C. But customers kept asking for toys. Think about that for a second. Lazarus discovered his true calling by accident when customers demanded products he wasn't even selling. So he listened. In 1957, he pivoted entirely to toys and renamed the company Toys R Us. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a revolution. Before Toys R Us, toy shopping meant small selections at department stores, mostly around Christmas. Lazarus created the first toy supermarket. Self-service shopping. Massive selection with up to 18,000 items. And here's the key innovation: year-round availability. He broke the industry's seasonal Christmas-focused model and turned toy shopping from a seasonal necessity into year-round entertainment. The warehouse-style stores with shopping carts and endless aisles transformed how America bought toys. One customer request, one pivot. 70 years of magic began with that moment. Fact number 9. Toys R Us went public in 1978 and the growth was explosive. By the 1990s, they had grown to over 1,500 stores worldwide with $11.2 billion in annual revenue. Let that sink in for a second. They controlled 20% of the entire U.S. toy market. The company's IPO made it a Wall Street darling and retail icon. Geoffrey the Giraffe became as recognizable as McDonald's Golden Arches. Parents across America knew that jingle. I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid. The company's dominance seemed absolutely unshakable as it expanded internationally. Store after store, country after country. This wasn't just retail success. This was cultural dominance. For an entire generation of Americans, Toys R Us wasn't just a store. It was childhood itself. The place where dreams lived on shelves and every visit felt like Christmas morning. Fact number 8. In August 2000, Toys R Us signed a 10-year exclusive deal with Amazon. They would be Amazon's sole toy and baby product supplier online. This seemed brilliant at the time. Hedge against e-commerce without building their own platform. But here's where it gets interesting. Amazon started allowing other toy sellers on their platform. Toys R Us sued in 2004 for $200 million claiming breach of contract. They won the lawsuit, but they lost everything that mattered. How does that happen? While Toys R Us was fighting in court, Amazon was learning the toy business, learning customer behavior, learning how to compete. The partnership that was supposed to protect Toys R Us from e-commerce became Amazon's training ground to destroy them. You cannot make this stuff up. The 10-year exclusive deal prevented Toys R Us from developing their own e-commerce capabilities during the most critical decade in retail history. They traded their digital future for short-term protection. At this point, Toys R Us still seemed invincible. $11 billion in revenue, 1,500 stores, 7 decades of dominance. What happened next would expose the fatal flaw that would eventually kill the company. Fact number 7. Between 2010 and 2015, Toys R Us spent $600 million trying to rebuild their e-commerce platform. $600 million. But their website remained slow, difficult to navigate, and couldn't handle holiday traffic spikes. Meanwhile, Amazon's toy sales grew 24% annually. I have watched enough companies implode to recognize this pattern. When you're spending hundreds of millions on technology and getting worse results, something is fundamentally broken. The company's digital transformation efforts were too little, too late. Multiple website redesigns failed to create a user experience even close to Amazon. Technical problems during crucial holiday shopping periods became legendary. Sites crashing on Black Friday, orders disappearing, customer service meltdowns, and every frustrated customer who couldn't complete their purchase? They went straight to Amazon, where everything worked perfectly. The digital divide wasn't just about technology, it was about customer trust. Once lost, impossible to recover. Fact number 6. In 2005, a private equity consortium led by KKR and Bain Capital bought Toys R Us for $6.6 billion in a leveraged buyout. Stay with me here, because this is important. They borrowed $5.2 billion of that purchase price and loaded it as debt onto Toys R Us itself. The company that had minimal debt suddenly owed over $5 billion. The annual interest payments alone were $400 million. $400 million that used to go to store improvements, inventory, and competing with Amazon now went to service debt created by the buyout. Over the next 12 years, Toys R Us paid over $1 billion in interest and fees to the private equity owners. Meanwhile, the stores grew outdated. Technology lagged further behind. The company that once defined retail innovation became a relic. And that, right there, is the moment everything changed. The private equity playbook. Buy with borrowed money. Load the debt onto the company. Extract fees. If it works, you win big. If it fails, someone else pays the price. Fact number 5. By summer 2017, major toy suppliers, including Mattel and Hasbro, began demanding cash payments up front instead of extending credit terms. This created a liquidity crisis that left Toys R Us unable to stock popular items for the critical holiday season. Here is what you need to understand. In retail, supplier credit is oxygen. When suppliers lose confidence and demand cash on delivery, retail death becomes inevitable. The math is brutal. Empty shelves drive away customers. Fewer customers mean less cash flow. Less cash flow means even emptier shelves. Toys R Us found itself in a vicious cycle they couldn't escape. The shelves that once overflowed with every toy imaginable started looking bare. Parents walking through stores couldn't find the hot holiday items their kids wanted. So where did they go? Amazon, Target, Walmart. Anywhere but the store that used to have everything but now had nothing when you needed it most. The suppliers who had built fortunes selling through Toys R Us for decades were now the ones pulling the plug. We're halfway through this corporate autopsy, and honestly, the patient was already dying. But what comes next is where the real tragedy unfolds. Which of these facts has surprised you most? I'm genuinely curious. Let me know in the comments. Fact number 4. On September 18, 2017, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy with $5.2 billion in debt. The company claimed this was a court-supervised financial restructuring to emerge stronger, not a liquidation, a reorganization. Chapter 11 was supposed to give them breathing room to renegotiate with creditors and suppliers, fix the balance sheet, modernize operations, come back fighting. But here's the problem with bankruptcy in retail. Consumer perception becomes reality. The filing scared away customers during the crucial holiday season. Parents don't want to buy Christmas presents from a bankrupt store. What if the warranties don't work? What if they can't return defective toys? What if the stores close before Christmas? The bankruptcy that was intended to save Toys R Us created the exact scenario the company hoped to prevent. Customer flight. The stigma of failure in an industry built on joy and magic. You can restructure debt. You cannot restructure trust. Fact number 3. During the 2017 holiday season, Toys R Us same-store sales fell 13.1%. 13.1%, in the most important season for toy retailers. As customers avoided the bankrupt retailer, the company's last hope for reorganization vanished. This was supposed to be their comeback Christmas, the holiday season that would prove they could survive. Instead, it became their funeral. Parents who had shopped at Toys R Us for decades stayed away. The magic was gone. The trust was broken. Store managers watched helplessly as foot traffic disappeared. Employees started updating their resumes. Suppliers prepared for the worst. And the private equity owners? They started calculating liquidation values. By January 2018, the writing was on the wall, forcing the company to abandon reorganization and begin liquidation. The final Christmas became a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom. Despite having inventory, the bankruptcy stigma drove customers to competitors permanently. Fact number 2. On March 15, 2018, Toys R Us announced it would liquidate all 735 US stores and 105 UK stores. The company cited inability to find a buyer or secure financing for reorganization. 70 years of operation. Over. The announcement marked the end of childhood for millions of Americans who grew up browsing those endless aisles. The liquidation process would take months. But this decision represented the final failure of every attempt to save the iconic retailer. Store by store, the lights went out. Everything must go sales stripped the shelves bare. Employees who had worked there for decades cleaned out their lockers for the last time. And parents had to explain to their children why the place where toys came from was disappearing forever. I wish I were making this up, but the human cost was devastating. The bankruptcy lawyers and consultants would make millions managing the liquidation. The private equity owners would walk away relatively unscathed, but 33,000 employees would lose their jobs. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. The most shocking revelation about who really paid the price is still to come. Fact number 1. The liquidation resulted in approximately 33,000 job losses in the US and UK. Many employees received only 60 days of severance pay despite decades of service. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. While workers lost everything, the private equity owners had already extracted over $200 million in fees during their 12 years of ownership. Let that sink in for a second. The same people who loaded Toys R Us with the debt that killed it walked away with hundreds of millions in profits. Management fees, advisory fees, transaction fees, monitoring fees. They had names for every way to extract money from a company they were slowly strangling. Growing up on a farm, you learn that if something sounds too good to be true, check the fine print. The fine print here was written in the blood of American workers. This wasn't incompetent management. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't even creative destruction. This was financial engineering designed to extract maximum value for private equity while leaving workers, communities, and childhood itself to pay the price. The numbers never lie, but people sure do. So what happened to the key players? Charles Lazarus, the founder who started it all by listening to his customers, died in March 2018, just weeks after the company he built was liquidated. The private equity executives? They moved on to their next deals. KKR and Bain Capital continue managing hundreds of billions in assets. Most Toys R Us employees found new jobs eventually, but many lost retirement savings and health benefits. The suppliers who cut off credit? They're now selling through Amazon. The real tragedy isn't just that Toys R Us died, it's how it died. Killed not by competition or changing markets, but by financial engineering that enriched a few while destroying something millions of Americans loved. What can we learn from this corporate autopsy? 3 critical lessons. First, debt kills. When private equity loads a company with borrowed money, they're betting someone else's future for their own profit. Second, in retail, customer trust is everything. Once parents stopped believing Toys R Us would be there for Christmas, the company was finished. Third, financial engineering isn't innovation, it's extraction. There's a difference between creating value and capturing it. Out here in the desert, you learn to see clearly. No distractions, just the truth. And when you look at this story without the noise, the truth is pretty stark. Toys R Us didn't fail because of Amazon or Walmart or changing consumer habits. It failed because financial engineers valued short-term profits over long-term survival. Now that is a story worth telling. Remember, this video is for educational purposes only. It's not financial advice. Always do your own research and consult professionals before making any investment decisions. Which moment shocked you the most? The Amazon partnership trap? The private equity extraction? Or that final Christmas death spiral? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which part of this story hit you hardest. If you want to see more corporate autopsies like this, subscribe and hit the bell. We're just getting started uncovering how America's greatest companies really died. Next time, we're examining another retail giant that fell even faster. And trust me, that story will make this one look simple. Another chapter of business history uncovered. The patterns are clear for those who look. Until next time, keep exploring.